Welcome back. Pardon me. That was a good lunch. This is known as the killer hour. The first hour after lunch. So I hope I don't lose most of you. Now remember, let's get started. Remember the reason we're here this weekend. We're not here to scare you. It's not the end of the world. We just want to be prepared for what's coming. And those of you who are watching and all, definitely the end of the world is closer. But I don't think it's next week or whatever. But none of us know. None of us know, but we need to be prepared. Once again, I want you to go home after these seminars and examine where you live and ask yourself, am I in a position where I live right now to have my independent water system, which we're going to get into in just a minute or less than a minute? Am I in a position to have my own garden, food production, orchard, garden, etc.? And will I have enough water to irrigate it? Will I have enough room where I'm living to have a large enough garden to keep us going? And then finally, am I in a position to have my independent heat supply, shelter, etc.? And up where I live, the snowpack is about 4 feet right now, 3 or 4 feet, and you do need heat. And we heat with wood. We've heated with wood for the last 19 years. And anyway, I'll get into that a little bit. So, let's get into independent water systems. Since it's almost impossible, this might hurt most of you, but I mentioned this just before we broke for lunch. It is impossible, or at least I don't know any way. Those of you who are on a municipal water system and a community water system, I don't know any way you can have your independent water system. I just don't. At the very least, you need to be in a position where you have a water well. Now that's my opinion. And I've built homes on wells, septic tanks, and off of wells for over a quarter century. In the last 20 years, I've lived off of a beautiful mountain creek, clear mountain creek, and filter the water before we drink it. And, excuse me, we don't live like primitive people. You know, we have a shower, we have a commode. Every time I take a shower, I don't have a fish come out and flap me in the face. We have a wonderful LG washer, have an LG dryer. It operates on propane and it has to have a little electricity. Well, we have an alternative energy system, and that provides electricity for our washer and dryer. Nancy has all the cooking conveniences she needs. If we watch television, we would have a television, but we don't watch it. We get the news or the snooze we need off of computers. The sun charges our computers, except for December, January. We hardly see the sun then. Then we have to rely on a diesel generator. I'll get into that later on. But independent water systems. Let me show you a picture of a typical country dweller's water system. Now, I apologize for these graphics, but I think you'll get the point. Here you have a well. It's a poor example of a well, but it goes down into the ground. Don't know how deep, it varies. And then it pumps water, stays underground, the pipe does, into where you have a diaphragm tank or a pressure tank. Now sometimes that tank might be under the house or in a pump house out here, or somewhere where it won't freeze if there's freezing temperatures in your area. Now this is a typical country dweller's water system. The minimum, the very minimum a person needs to do if they have a well. Now, I'm not talking to you folks that are on a municipal water system. Like I've said, I don't know what to tell you. I do know what to tell you. The Lord has told you. But those of you who are on a well, the least you can do is to have a hand pump. Because when the power goes down, you've got to have at the very least, a hand pump. Now, I'm going to tell you how to get that water out of a well when the power goes down, the nationwide power goes down. I'm going to tell you how to get the water, I'm going to show you how to get the water out of that well and pressurized into your house where you can take a shower, flush the commode, whatever. But the very least I recommend is to have a hand pump. You can always have the rest of what I'm going to talk to you about. Before we talk a little bit about hand pumps, we need to cover a topic that's called the static water level. Static water level. When a well driller comes out and drills a well, after he drills the well, in fact, while he's drilling the well, he'll be going through veins of water. And when he stops the rig, you'll hear, most of the time, you'll hear those veins emptying water into the well as the well fills up. And after a 24-hour period of not drilling, of just letting it sit there, that water is going to fill up from all the veins that he goes through, and it's going to go up and rest at the highest level that one of those veins are. Does that make sense? That's called the static water level. You need to know what your static water level is. And you folks, I think you folks have a well. Somebody over here earlier had a well. And when your well driller drills the well, he will generally have on the certificate he gives you or the information he gives you the static water level. Now, why is it important to know the static water level? Because you need to know how far down to let the hand pump go. And I'll explain in just a little bit. But let's get back to the well. Here you have a concrete slab to keep contaminants out, etc., etc. Now here's that same well with a typical submersible pump. That submersible pump will be close to the bottom, not on the bottom, because over the years there'll be silt that builds up, and you don't want that pump in silt. Then there's a cable that goes down and energizes the pump, where it pushes water up this pipe through what is called a pitless adapter, stays underground, on into your house to wherever, pardon me, to wherever the diaphragm tank is. Excuse me. Okay. Now let's look at how a hand pump is installed. This is that same well, same static water level, and you notice something a little different. The cylinder, you hear that sound? Out in the mountains, we call that city coyotes, because we don't hear sirens out there. Yes, ma'am. Yes, very good question. All of this information is in our book. So if you're not writing it down, if you get the book, it'll be in there. As a matter of fact, I want to just take time. I'm so glad you brought that up. I guess, except for a few words I might add, I think everything we cover is in the material out on the table, and much more, I mean days more, so much more, from people, experts all over the country where we travel to film them. So, getting back to the hand pump, notice the cylinder is the pump part of this. It's not up here. This is just the handle connected to the pump rod that goes down in the middle of the delivery pipe to where you're standing up here energizing this pump or cylinder, and that's what causes the pumping action to push it up and out through the spout. So you might have thought this was the pump. It really isn't. This is. Now, have you noticed there's a difference between the position of this pump on a hand pump and an electrical submersible pump, which is usually, well, it should always be down here within a few feet of the bottom. The reason being, this pump uses all of this shaft as its reservoir, particularly if you don't have that much yield from the veins in that well. So that's like a reservoir that this pump down here takes from. Now, because a hand pump doesn't pump that much volume out, generally the static water level, the water replacing what has been taken out of the well, this does not overcome that yield of the well. So it just needs, we highly recommend, if you have a well and you put a hand pump in, we recommend putting it down at least 20 feet below the static water level. And let me explain why. We have a friend who lives in the North Georgia mountains, and he has a well, and in fact, let me just mention this. If you have a well with a 6-inch casing, it's known as a 6-inch diameter well, that well can handle a submersible pump as well as a hand pump at the same time. That probably answered a lot of questions here. So once again, a hand pump and an electric submersible pump can coexist in a well that is a 6-inch well or larger. You might be able to squeeze it in if you have a well that's just a little smaller, but most residential homes have a 6-inch well. Then you get into larger wells for commercial reasons. Okay, our friend in North Georgia, he has a well, has a submersible pump, and he also had a hand pump. He installed it himself, and he put this cylinder just below the static water level at the time he installed it. Now you got to realize the static water level will vary. There happened to be a drought in North Georgia, a 2-year drought. It was pretty bad. And he would go out maybe once every month or two and pump it just to make sure that thing is working, because he wanted to have backup water. He didn't want to die of thirst. And he went out one time in the middle of this drought, nothing came up. And he was very perplexed. He didn't know what to do. And so he pulled his pipe, his cylinder and everything, and he put a 20-foot extension on there, and then it worked great. During the drought, the static water level had dropped below where the cylinder was hanging. Okay, let me recommend 3 good hand pumps and where to get them. The first one is called the Bison. Once again, all of this is in our book, Sustainable Preparedness. The Bison hand pump, made in New England, very good quality. I have pumped that pump. It's easy to pump as far as hand pumps go. In fact, we have a friend in Northern California who lives in a community where the property is 3-4 acres, something like that, and they have a community water system that he lives on. And he wanted to be sure that he's prepared when the power goes down. He wanted to have an independent water source in addition to his community system. So right now they live on their community system, and in his backyard he had a well driller come in, drill a well, and he put a Bison on top. So he will always have water in the worst, he should have water in the worst of conditions. Now, you have a threaded spout there. You can thread a hose onto it, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this. This pump will pump from a static water level as far down as 300 feet. And you can go to their website. It's called Bison, Bison Pumps, PUMPS.com. One word, bisonpumps.com. Or you can go to Lehman's.com. Have you ever heard of Lehman's Catalog? Anybody here? It's an Amish store from Kidron, Ohio. Okay. Seems like the farther south we go, the fewer people know about Lehman's. Yes, ma'am. Do most properties have water? Mm-hmm. Generally, I think you need to speak with well drillers in the area. Generally, you drill that hole, stick a straw down in it called a submersible pump, and you'll have water, generally. Some places will have water much deeper than other places. I had about 8, I built homes in rural areas a few times, and I probably had 8 to 10 wells drilled. They averaged 350 feet, and you might have static water level 50 to 80 feet above that with a good yield. Then I drilled a well for ourselves in the next county north of where I built most of the time. And I had to go down to 800 feet. Man, that hurt. Because a well driller charges you so much per foot. And that was thousands more. But it was nothing like what it cost up in Idaho. And maybe down here. I don't know what it costs down here. It might be pretty expensive. But yes, I think you can find water most anywhere. But if you're looking at an area to relocate to, I would recommend calling the county extension or local well drillers and get their opinions. But yes, the good Lord has created this earth where there are veins of water, various levels. And when you tap one, it's wonderful, I tell you. The earth is made to where you can put that metal straw down in the ground, and that pump can pump it out, stay in your water system, and the only time it sees the light of day is from the end of your spout in your sink until it goes down the drain. And that's it. Then it's out of sight again, goes out into the bleeder lines, etc. The water systems are just amazing to me. And it's really neat to have, it's such a wonderful feeling to have your own independent water system. That's the number one basic necessity that we need, or that we have. Okay, another really good pump is called a simple pump. It's all stainless steel like this one. It's polished different. Little brass threaded spout there for a hose. And with this pump, you can buy a solar pump that goes on it. Of course, it'll be costly. It has one solar panel, and it will pump, of course, only on sunny days. And down here, you have a lot of sunny days. Well, I've been here over a month, and I haven't seen too many sunny days. But I'm told you have sun down here. So a lot more than we do in Idaho in the wintertime. Wintertime in Idaho, let me just tell you, come March, we stop running our generator. And our solar panels will supply us with all the power we need until the following October. And then as the months roll in, the sun will go away for a few days, come back, fill up your battery through the solar panels, and then it'll go away and you use that battery full of juice. You use that up, hopefully it'll bridge those cloudy days till you get to more sunny days. And then when you come to December, January, almost every day is cloudy. That's when you rely on your generator more and more. I'm sorry, I got off topic there. Okay, let me tell you where to get this pump. there is an Adventist company in West Virginia called Stoves and More. STOVESANDMORE.com. It's all one word, Stoves and More. Now this pump will go down, the simple pump will go down to a static water level of 323 feet, unless they've improved it since I checked that stat. This one goes down to 300, this one goes down to 323. You can order a solar pump on the top, and this pump will also pressurize your diaphragm tank. So those of you who are on a pump, a well, which is, were you folks on the well? One couple here, and that's it. Some of you in the future will probably be on a well. And what gives you that pressure is the diaphragm tank. The electric pump pumps the water, excuse me, out of that well through the pipes to your diaphragm tank. And I say diaphragm tank because it's a big rubber type diaphragm that as water is pumped in, it stretches that diaphragm tank to where there's pressure in your tank. I am so sorry. Every time you turn the faucet on, that diaphragm pushes the water out. And that's where you get your water pressure from. You can hook a hose up to this, and the other end of the hose, put a female adapter on that, and screw it onto the hose bib on the side of your house. Of course, open it up. Now this is when the power is off. You won't have any water when the power is off. And you can send little Johnny out, have him pump that until the required pressure in the house. Then he can stop pumping, and you'll have running water from just using a hand pump. Now, it won't last for very long. You have to, pardon me, you have to keep sending little Johnny out to pump water. If you have a solar pump, I don't know how well those work. If it's real sunny, maybe that'll take care of it. I don't know. Okay, let me show you the last. I don't have a picture of it, so I can't show you. Let me tell you about the last hand pump. And it is, to me, if I were going to get a hand pump, I would get this one. Thank you, babe. Thank you. It's called the Storm Pump. STORM. The Storm Pump. I'm going to get some water down here. Sorry, it sounds like this is contagious. I hear others coughing. If anybody needs a cough drop, my wife just brought me one. I'll share it with you. I can't have it now because you'd hear me sucking on it up here. The Storm Pump, you can find it at that same store I told you about, stovesandmore.com. And you can go to their website. It's Storm Pump, STORMPUMP.com, and look at their pumps. Now, I talked with one of the owners about this pump, and he said, I wish I could remember. He's passed away now. I can't. Maybe I could talk with his partner. They make these in our neck of the woods. The Storm Pump, I think he said, they tested it through 250,000 cycles. In other words, 250,000 pumps. It's either 250,000 or 350,000. At the end of that test, they took it apart and it hardly showed any wear. That's incredible, folks. Because for you to, is there anyone here that has a hand pump? No. Okay, if anybody would, you folks would. That is a lot of pumping. I don't know if you'll ever pump a hand pump 350,000 times. And they said this pump barely showed wear. So it's I was very impressed with this pump. It's very heavy duty. Storm Pump. Now, it will pump from as far down as 350 feet. Now remember, 350 feet down, static water level, versus 323 versus 300. So 350 feet down. Okay. Now let's look at some independent ways to supply pressurized water to your home, hopefully in the country someday. This is a good example of a residential independent water system. This is one example. Now, here you have your well again going down into the ground. You have that giant straw going down with basically it's a submersible pump hanging on a pipe with a wire going to it. And then that pump will be energized by electricity. And I'm going to go into a little detail about what kind of electricity. It will pump, and it can pump up to a cistern up the hill. If you live on a piece of property that has a hill by your cabin, and then it can create water, gravity flow down into your house. Now you might ask, why can't I just pump from this, like the picture I showed, straight into the house? Well, you can, but what if something happens to that pump? Or what if you have, well, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Two ways to supply electricity to energize this pump. One way is through an alternative energy system where you have solar panels, your inverter, batteries, charge controller, etc. Don't worry about remembering all this. And then it supplies electricity down to your pump. Now that's one way to get water up here. Now you might ask, why do I want to get water up there? Well, wouldn't it be nice to have a good supply of water when, I say when, if something happens to your alternative energy system? Wouldn't it be nice? Now you might ask, how much water would I need up here? Nancy and I, I've measured it, just the two of us, now that we're empty nesters, we can go 2 weeks on about, really a little over 2 weeks, on 1,200 gallons of water. That's washing clothes, washing dishes, etc. It's not irrigating the orchard or the garden. That's just domestic use. So this is one way that you can provide energy to the well. Another way is through solar panels. You don't even need to have an alternative energy system. With solar panels, it will supply not AC electricity. Do you folks know the difference between AC and DC electricity? Everything in here operates on AC. That means there has to be a generating plant somewhere in the country generating electricity for these lights to be on, for that projector to be on. This computer is operating on a battery. But AC, that means there is a generator somewhere in the fruited plains somewhere creating electricity. Now, DC is the only electricity that I know of that can be stored. And if it wasn't for DC electricity, none of you would be sitting here right now. Why? I assume all of you drove here. And if you drove here, you probably had a battery in your car to start it. Batteries are full of DC electricity. It's the only electricity that you can store. So, solar panels produce DC electricity. Your alternative energy system, generally produces and supplies AC. Now it can also do DC in some instances, but as a general rule, AC from your alternative energy system and DC if you're going to use just solar panels. Now that will pump only when the sun is, during the day. And then how do you get water at night? Well, you have this tank up here full, which will give you gravitational flow. Anybody have any questions? I hope I explained that correctly. Yes, ma'am. Okay, that's a very good question. The question is, just the 60 feet, is that all you need to gain enough pressure into your house? It will work, but I recommend going at least 80 to 100. And this is why. Every foot you go up, for every 2 feet you go up, you gain 0.87 pounds of pounds per square inch coming down. So for every 2 feet you go up, you have 0.87 pounds per square inch coming down. I highly recommend at least 80 to 100 feet. Yes, sir? What if you don't have enough height? Okay. I'm going to get to that in just a second. That's your thinking. I love to hear this. Now, what if you all right. I don't know where that went. Okay, what if your tank, you don't have a high enough hill to get 60 to 80 to 100 feet or more in elevation where you have greater pounds per square inch? What if your what if your hill doesn't go up so high? Well, you can get what is called a booster pump and put it in line down below. I'll get into that in just a second. I'm afraid I'm really confusing you. So just hold off and we're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay. Now, to answer this gentleman's question, what if you don't have a hill for gravity flow? Then you go back to the original well system that I talked to you about, and you have an alternative energy system, and it will pump directly into the house, not up a hill. The hill basically is just, with a tank up the hill, is just basically supplying you with a backup in case something happens to your well pump, your alternative energy system, or if you don't have enough sun and you're relying on the sun to get your energy from. Did that answer your question? Okay. Now, there's another way. This is the ultimate setup, spring heads or springs. Now, I want to stop and tell you right now, this is very rare to find a spring head on the property if you're looking for property. It's very rare. And it's very rare to have a spring head up a hill where you can collect that, like this, where you have a spring head up here, and then you collect that into a cistern and have, I need to change that to 80 feet, and have 80 to 100 feet or more elevation, so you'll get a good amount of pressure going into your house. If you do find some property that you're looking at, and you do find a spring head up a hill, that's just priceless. That means you can have pressurized water in your cabin without any kind of electricity, without any kind of moving parts. This is the type system Congressman Bartlett has that I talked to you about. He found a spring head way up the mountain, and he buried pipe all the way down from that spring head, collected it in a tank like this, buried it so it doesn't freeze, and buried the line all the way down to his house. Wonderful pressure, no electricity, nothing to go wrong. The ultimate setup. Now, what happens if you find the spring head down here, and then that means this tank, the collecting tank, has to be down below that. That means the only gravitational flow will be just this little bit. So what do? You won't have enough pressure. Well, you put a booster pump in. And that's what I was referring to, putting a booster pump in. It can be a DC booster pump that operates off your alternative energy system. Now, creeks, another way to get to get water pressurized into your cabin. When the power goes down, you're going to be in good shape. Now, this is the way, the setup I'm about to tell you, in fact, I'm going to show you a short little clip, involves a ram pump. Anybody here hear of a ram pump? Really? And you don't have a well? That's amazing. Invented about 300 years ago in France. A ram pump is one of the best ideas since sliced bread, I would say. This is the way it works, or this is a crude setup. You have the creek, and generally the creek is going to be below your cabin or your house. If it's up above your house, you're going to be in trouble someday during a flood. Okay, your creek. You build a little dam so you'll wind up with a little pool, a collecting pool. Then you have a metal pipe coming down, needs to be metal so the sides are rigid, and the water will come down hopefully at least 10 feet, and that will be creating a hydraulic ram. The ram pump uses the kinetic energy of falling water to raise a portion of that water to another elevation. So the pressure of this water pushing into the ram pump will take a little bit of that pressure and shoot it up here. And it goes ram, 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 like that. And that's where the ramming action comes from. There's a mechanism in here. I don't understand how a ram pump works. All I know is they work. And it will take a little bit of that. When you have a little bit going up 24/7, you'd be surprised how much it'll supply water to you. These are phenomenal inventions that the French came up with. Yes, sir. Oh, yes. Is the cistern buried? Absolutely, always, because you don't want it to freeze. Now, down here, you might not have to worry about that so much. But up where we live, really starting mid to northern California, I would always bury everything, your pipes, your cistern, everything. Okay. Oh, I was going to tell you about ram. Well, let me show you this short clip so you'll have an idea what it's like. Well, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll show you a picture of our family. Those are our grandkids. Well, nice music. Well, let's see what that is. I don't know that I'm going to be able to show you the ram pump. I'm sorry? No, the question was that picture our property? No, we live probably an hour and a half from there. That's within 13 miles of the Canadian border on a beautiful lake, Priest Lake, Upper Priest Lake. You can see it on the map. Small little lake. They don't allow large boats on it. They don't allow anyone to build on it. It's really a wonderful place to go camping. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with this thing. I don't understand computers. Did somebody say something? Okay, so let me go back to this picture of rams. This is mechanical. Something can go wrong, but let me tell you how dependable they can be. There was a couple hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And, you know, the Appalachian Trail that runs from North Georgia on up to Maine. And they stopped to take a break, take their backpacks off. And as they were resting, they kept hearing a noise, very muffled, sounding like this. Dun, 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 dun. And they wondered if it was some species of bird or whatever. They turned around and all they could see is a bunch of trees that used to surround a homestead that probably burned down maybe decades and decades ago, maybe a rock fireplace. And they came to the conclusion, well, they got their little shovels out, sanitary shovels, and they eventually decided it's underground near where they're sitting. They dug down a little bit and found out it was a ram pump that was working underground. And they figured out that it must have delivered water up the hill to this home site, and that's where they got their water from. And so it had been operating for only the Lord knows how long. Another story is there was an Amish man who wanted to raise water from a lower pond up to a watering pond for his herd of cattle. And so he installed a ram pump. And the ram pump lifted water from that lower pond up to the upper one. And it worked wonderful for many, many years. The only thing he did to it at year 50 was put a couple of neoprene O-washers in it. And that was it. It worked so well. Okay, enough about ram pumps. I hope you've gained something from this. There's more in our book, Sustainable Preparedness. We also have a DVD that shows you how to develop a spring head. That is that's a lost art. And we went to a gentleman in the mountains of western North Carolina and filmed him demonstrating how to develop a spring head where the water coming out will be sanitary and sterile. And it's a lost art. He's done maybe 13 spring heads, so he knows how to do it, and you'll see on the DVD. Okay. I've finished talking about how to get that water out of the ground or out of a creek from a spring head and pressurize it into your house when the nation's power grid is gone. Now let's talk about the third thing, the third basic necessity you need. First was water, second is food, this is heat, heating with wood. Now, I have built some very nice homes in my life for over a quarter century. And we put very nice systems in our home from homes that we built for other people. We put heat pumps in, natural gas, propane systems. And they were very, very, very good systems. And then when we moved to Idaho about 19 years ago, we decided to build a home, a small home, where we had an independent heating system. And that's called wood heat, wood stove. I'd never had a wood stove before. And I want to tell you now, it's the absolute best heat I've ever experienced. You come in from the cold, and if you go over to the register on a heat pump, you might feel a little warmth, but you really don't warm up. And you come into where there's a wood stove, and man, you can back up to that stove and it'll heat you up in a few seconds. And if it doesn't heat you up fast enough, you can just sit on the stove if you want. So heating with wood is a wonderful way to heat. Now I want to tell you this. If you're in an area where it's cool, you don't have to start a fire every day. You have a fire in there 24/7. You fill up the box with wood or put as much as you are used to putting in to let it burn all night. Get a good night's rest. Wake up the next morning. Your house is toasty warm. You'll go in and look at the stove and there's a few ashes. then you start out all over again, putting small pieces, then larger pieces, and it burns all day long. You don't have to go through matches that much. Now, in the spring and the fall, you do almost every day when it heats up during the day and it cools off at night. I need to ask, is there anyone here that heats with wood or has heated with wood? Okay, a few more. You know, there is more work to it than just going over and turning the thermostat. Like Nancy was saying yesterday, you ask some of our young people nowadays, where does heat come from? It's from the thermostat on the wall. And so there's more work to heating with wood, as you folks know. But you know what they say about a match? It'll warm you twice. Or heating wood, it'll warm you twice. It'll warm you up when you split it and cut it and split it. Then it'll warm you again when you burn it. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
So you pour in water in the reservoir, in the wood stove itself. It had a section there. And then the water would heat up from the wood.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would use it for your dishes.
Absolutely. Wonderful way. Yes. It's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with me. Okay, most everybody knows how to throw a log in the stove, like I mentioned earlier. So we're not going to go into that, but and we're not going to talk about various stoves, which are the best or whatever. I'll just say this, I prefer a cast iron stove. But plate steel, they make good plate steel stoves nowadays too. What I want to do is cover, Nancy, if you can hear me back there, can you bring those chaps and what goes with it? If you can hear me, Nancy. I forget this so much. Oh, look at that. My wife is so efficient. It's here. Okay, first thing we want to look at is a fire extinguisher. Every home, whether you heat with wood or not, needs one of these in it. Now, I'm going over some fire safety features, talking primarily about heating with wood. Heating with wood is very safe if you follow these precautions. See this fire extinguisher over here? Every commercial building is supposed to have those in it. Now, I'm talking about a rechargeable fire extinguisher, not a throwaway fire extinguisher or disposable fire extinguisher. This one is commercial grade. That means it is rechargeable. Now, why do I say that you need a rechargeable fire extinguisher? You might wonder, rechargeable, what do you mean? It has pressure in it. It also has a powder, a fire repellent, I guess, called ABC powder. Anybody, are you a fireman or know about them? Okay, ABC powder. And there's pressure, there's ABC powder comes somewhere up to here, maybe a third of it. The rest is where the pressure happens. Well, let's say little Johnny goes out and plays with matches in the middle of the summer down here. Well, it's pretty dry in the middle of the summer, isn't it? And he starts a fire. And he comes in, Mommy, there's a fire outside. Well, you immediately know little Johnny's been doing something he shouldn't have. You grab the fire extinguisher off the wall. You go outside, put it out. It doesn't take much of the powder, much of the charge. So you bring it back in, and you hang it up on the wall for the next emergency. Then a couple of years later, you have a flash fire in your frying pan or whatever, a fire somewhere else, and you need it again. You grab that same fire extinguisher, and you go to put the fire out, and you pull the trigger, or you squeeze the trigger, and nothing comes out. Nothing comes out. Now, why is that? Because when you have most any fire extinguisher, there's a seal at the top that when you use it the first time, it breaks that seal, and they don't always maintain their pressure for a long period of time after that. So this is why I'm saying get a rechargeable fire extinguisher. It might cost a little bit more, but you want a rechargeable one. So every time you use that, you want to take it back in, let them recharge it, put a new seal in. So it will be ready for the next emergency that you have. One other thing, at least once a year, are you pretty versed with fire extinguishers? Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong on this. From what I understand, the ABC powder in there will harden like a rock if you don't use it, if it hangs on the wall and you don't agitate it. And when you go to use it, you'll have a rock in there, and the only thing that'll come out will be air pressure and not that ABC powder that you desperately need at that time. So once a year, you want to take that fire extinguisher off the wall, turn it over, get a rubber mallet, whack the bottom, and you want to make sure you feel that weight transfer, that it has loosened up. So it'll be in a powder form should you need it over the next year. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the next thing, has anyone here ever experienced what is called a chimney fire? Anyone here familiar with what a chimney fire is? Okay, maybe one hand. When you burn firewood in a stove or in a fireplace, if you don't burn dried firewood, when I say dried firewood, out here the wood is drier. Let's say you're heating with wood, you have your wood split, stacked, and if it hasn't been air dried at least a year, if it's green wood, you put it in your stove to burn. And if you have a good bed of coals in there, it will start green wood. And then after a while, that green wood will catch fire. And at the same time, it'll be causing that sap inside the wood to exit that wood in the form of vapor. It'll go up the stovepipe, and as it goes farther from the stove firebox, it will cool off and start collecting on the inside of the stovepipe in layers of creosote. That vapor coming out of your green wood is actually vaporized creosote that can collect up in your stovepipe. And under the right conditions, that creosote, if you have a lot built up there and you haven't kept it cleaned out, that creosote can ignite. And if you have air outlets down below in your stove, it'll pull that air up and it'll fan that fire, and it'll shoot flames out the top of the stovepipe, and it can melt your stovepipe. If you have a mason fireplace, it can cause the mortar in between your tile flue liners to chip, and flames can go through that and burn your house down. I have a friend who that happened to with a mason fireplace. So how do you keep that from happening? Burn wood that has been dried at least a year. At least a year. Now back east where it's more moist, you get rain off and on all year long. I would say let it dry more than 1 year. But out here in the west, it's drier wood, at least a year. Now, what happens if you have a chimney fire? A friend of ours who is a fire chief, he's on one of our DVDs back in the Smoky Mountains. He says that the chimney fires are extremely difficult to put out. But he told me one of the best ways to put a chimney fire out, if you should ever have one, I would say very possibly none of you will have one. If you we've been heating with wood for 19 years. We've never had one. And some of my wood hasn't been as dry as I need to dry it. But I brush it out just about every year. and clean the stovepipe. That's most important, to clean your stovepipe at least once a year. Yes, ma'am?
The wood that they sell at the store, has that been dried for a year?
The question is, the wood that you buy from a store, has that been dried a year? I would ask to see. Most of the wood I've seen at a store is extremely expensive. And I think it's been dried probably at least a year. But there's nothing like taking your old pickup out with a good chainsaw, a good Stihl or Husqvarna, and go cut your year's supply of wood. I'm getting into more topics here than I've cut out, but this is important. Yes, first, and then ladies first.
What if we live in an area like this, even out in the country, but there's no trees?
So
So then I guess you wouldn't.
what do you do? What has the Lord told you to do? You know, you can go to nearby forests and pay the National Forest like $20 for 40 cords. Now, we burn 5 to 6 cords a winter, way up where it's cold. 40 cords for $20, that's a steal, but you have to cut it. You get to cut it. It's good exercise. And then you have to take it home and split it, or you can split it out in the forest, etc. Take it home and burn it if you don't have a tree on your property. But what do you do when you can't buy or sell? You have to always keep that in the back of your mind. I highly recommend owning property that has a minimum of 5 acres of forested land. At least 5 acres if you live in the east. Wood grows a little slower out here, so it might be more. And why do I say 5 acres? You can have a renewable supply of firewood if you manage it properly. The key word is managing it properly. And that should be sufficient, hopefully. None of us know how long that period of no buy, no sale is going to last. None of us know. None of us know when it's going to come. But it's sure indicating it doesn't seem like it's going to be too far off. Now, did I have another hand? Yes, sir.
Are wax logs an issue?
What laws?
Wax, Duraflame, wax logs, like Home Depot and so forth.
Wax laws. We don't live in California, so we live where there's liberty. I don't know what that means. Okay. Okay. Now, when a chimney fire starts, it's very difficult to put out. There's a product you can buy to have on hand, and laboratory results show that on an average of 22 seconds, it will put that chimney fire out. And this is the name of it. It's a Chimfex stick. It looks like a road flare that you might keep in your trunk in case you come onto an accident, only it's not a flare. You break the cap off, the black cap off, or maybe it's the white. I haven't opened this, I don't want to. But there's supposed to be a glob of something that strikes this is like a giant match. There's sandpaper on the inside of the cap. Anyway, you strike that, you strike the striker with the sandpaper, and what it will do is ignite this Chimfex stick, and it gives off smoke that is oxygen absorbing smoke. So, let's say you have a wood stove, and you hear a chimney fire going. And when I say hear, people who have experienced it tell me that it sounds like a locomotive going over their house, or like a jet engine, a jet flying right over their house. It's roaring, it's terrible, terrifying. You don't want to live through one. But if you do have one, you want to have these around. And when you do have a chimney fire, go to your stove, open it up, ignite this, and drop this or throw it in. If you, it depends on how your stove opens up. Throw it into the firebox where the fire is, where you have a fire, not on the fire but off to the side. The chimney fire is up in the stovepipe. Then close it. Close every intake, air intake in that stove. When you have a stovepipe going up, sometimes you'll have a damper. You know what I'm talking about? You want to open that damper up. Open that damper up where it will allow this oxygen-absorbing smoke to get up to where the chimney fire is, and on average of 22 seconds, according to laboratory reports, it'll snuff that fire out. I have 2 of these. Just in case, this puts the first one puts it out, but if it just happens to reignite again, I have another Chemfex stick for it. So, I highly recommend getting these. When you do start heating with wood, you folks who already heat with wood, you might already have one, but I recommend getting one. From what I understand, they work. Okay, anybody here cut wood with a chainsaw besides you folks? Okay, a lot of people. All right, the majority of the cuts. Now, once again, I'm telling you the worst case scenario. I've been cutting wood since I was 16. That's been 12 years. I wish. It's been many decades, and I've never had an accident. Never cut myself with a saw. Thank you, dear Lord. But they say the majority of accidents when you're cutting with wood is from your waist down. And it's wise to get a pair of chainsaw chaps. This is a pair of chainsaw chaps. Now, what makes these so special? They look like, any of you ever see the TV program Rawhide? Where they wear the leather chaps around their legs to brand cattle or whatever. That's what this is. These are made that way, where they buckle around your leg. And it's made with multiple layers of Kevlar. Now, those of you familiar with Kevlar know it's tough stuff. And that's what they make for the military. That's what they make their helmets out of, I understand. Some canoes are made out of Kevlar. And bulletproof vests are made out of Kevlar. If it stops a bullet, it's pretty tough stuff. Well, they make these where they have multiple layers of Kevlar. And that's in case you slip or anything happens and the bar comes down while that chain is flying around that bar. It can save your life. This is a pair of that belongs to an individual. I won't give his name because he used to live here in San Diego. He had a practice here. And he moved up to our neck of the woods. And he loves to cut wood. It relaxes him. One day, evidently, he didn't tell me this, but I assumed he might have been cutting all day and was getting tired. You don't ever want to cut wood when you're tired because your motor skills don't match up. Your brain and what happens down here doesn't always keep up with each other. And he was cutting a log, undercutting the log, and that's perfectly fine if you know what you're doing, and he's smart enough to know what he was doing, except it evidently wasn't cutting fast enough. The chain must have been dull. And he put his knee underneath the motor as he was holding it to push up on the motor so the saw would cut a little faster. His knee went just a little bit too far into the chain while it was running, probably wide open. And this is the one he was using. And this is what happened. Now, I've been showing this for years. And there used to be Kevlar, Kevlar hanging out here, and it's worn off. But let me show you. Do you see anything missing back here? Isn't there something missing here? Did somebody say blood stains? No blood stains. It worked. It cut his jeans and barely nipped the skin on his kneecap. He put a Band-Aid on it and he was okay. It could have lamed him for the rest of his life, if I'm using the right word. Or he could have cut him pretty bad, and he could have bled out in the woods or there at his home, because where he was cutting is way out. So it's very important to wear chainsaw chaps. They go from your waist down to the top of your shoes. Let's go over these points. This is most important. You want to have a helmet. Now, why? I talked with an old logger. He's probably in his 80s now. Of course, he's retired. He told me about the time before they had these big dinosaur machines that go through the woods and you cut the tree, it holds the tree and turns it sideways, all that stuff. This is when they used to use chainsaws to cut trees. This is when loggers were real men. And what happened was, he said he did not check this particular tree that he was about to cut down. He didn't look up in the tree and see if there's a widow maker up there. Do you know what a widow maker is? It's part of the tree that for some reason has died, and it's up there rotting, and under the right circumstances that could break and fall down on you. He said he failed to check that tree, and he said he was cutting away, and the next thing he knew, he woke up on his back, chainsaw was on the ground just purring away. Now the Lord saved his life. He didn't get cut. And when he woke up, there was a huge part of the tree on his chest. It came down, hit him on the head. He didn't have a helmet on, and knocked him out. So this is why it's important to have a helmet and to wear that helmet. You only get one set of eyes, 2 eyes. You want to protect those from the chips. They could come up, or anything can come up into your eyes. You want to protect your ears. Chainsaws are loud. I don't know if you realize it, but I have 2 hearing aids on because I never protected my ears. I'll say this, I do like to target practice also, and I didn't protect my ears. So you want to be sure you have ear protection. You can go to a Steel dealer, Husqvarna dealer, probably an Echo dealer. All these are brands of chainsaws, and they will have helmets that have ear muffs that come up and stay attached to the helmet. They have a mask that comes down to protect your eyes, and then of course it's a helmet to protect your head. And then finally, foot protection. You want to, when you go out to cut wood, you want to wear boots that have steel toes. Are you familiar with boots that have steel toes? You can buy those. You can also buy boots that have reinforced leather, extra thick leather, the end of your boot. I would recommend steel toes first, leather reinforced toes second. But at least have some reinforcement to protect your feet, your toes. Okay, that's it. The safety precautions I wanted to mention about heating with wood. Now, all I can say about renewable energy, it is such a complex topic. Becoming free from dependence on utilities. I want to ask, is there a brave soul? Now, you don't have to raise your hand if you'd prefer not to. I know I wouldn't raise my hand. But I'm going to ask you, is there a brave soul here that can tell us what your power bill is a month? I don't blame you. I wouldn't do it either. I have heard, okay? $70? That's cheating now. I've heard 600, 400, 300, etc. That's very good. How do you heat? Gas, okay. You're down here where it's a lot warmer. I'm up there where it gets cool, pretty cold. I've heard as high as $600 a month. Are you on PP&G down here? Okay. I hear PP&G is pretty high. I hear, but yes, ma'am.
Here my bill is about $75
Okay,
But I lived 4 years in Fresno in a 3,000 square foot house with 2 heating systems and air conditioning both. And
Okay.
$450 a month.
okay. Would you say the power bills down here average 150 a month? Average? Okay, you're in a warmer area, and it sounds like your power company is a lot more reasonable than PP&G. Like I said, we've had people say 600 a month, 400, 500, whatever. Yes, sir? Could you talk a little louder? I'm sorry.
He is saving half of his energy bill half of his electric bill with his new refrigerator. And I measured it, it draws 0.87 amps, 100 watts per hour. Just 100 watt bulb, that's all it takes. The new refrigerators, they've got motors in them that are fantastic on efficiency. Now, just an AC operated.
Is it an AC?
Yeah, and the refrigerator was, new, it was less than $400.
Yeah. A refrigerator can be the most costly appliance in your house because it cycles on and off 24/7.
His electric bill went to less than half of what it was.
I believe that, yeah. Now, most of the nation, I think, is in the hundreds of dollars every month. We've lived off the grid for the last 19 years, and you know what our power bill is? 1 drum of red diesel, off-road diesel. That's a year. 1 drum of off-road diesel. Now, that drum of off-road diesel cost about $150, and that's our power bill. So now we do heat with wood. That, you need to add that in there also. But we have enough wood on my property. When I'm in better shape, I can cut and burn our own wood. So anyway, alternative energy is absolutely wonderful. I don't have the time to go into this. Our son, who grew up on alternative energy, lives in a house with 2 children, his wife and 2 children now, about an hour from us, and he lives off the grid. He has started a website that's the only one I know of in the world, unless somebody has started one recently. It's called Off Grid Boot Camp. If you want to learn more about living off the grid, alternative energy, I recommend going to this website. He'll have a few clips on there that are free. Of course, there is, if you want to take the course, there's a fee for the course. So I recommend going to this site. Alternative energy, living off the grid, is not a must. You can, when the power goes down, you can always burn candles or whatever else. But we have running water. We have a wonderful DC refrigerator that uses very, 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 very little electricity. And like I said, I have power tools. I have all kinds of, I like Makita. I have a table saw, a compound slider, routers. Like I said earlier, my wife has all kinds of appliances in the kitchen. We don't have a TV. We'd operate that if we had one. So anyway, it's a wonderful way to live, but it's not a necessity. I recommend that you look into it. Now, for those of you who want to, I've come to the end of our seminars, and those of you who might have missed it, I think I played this clip right after lunch, where Nick tells you a little bit about our DVDs. They're much more in depth than what he shows, and they are much more in depth than what we're talking about. So those of you who want to stay behind and see this again, it's about 15 minutes, I'm going to play it. And For those of you who won't, or, are leaving, thank you for coming, and God bless you. In the coming days, we are really living in very interesting times. I'll take one question, and that's it.
You mentioned there was another, I thought you said statprep.com or something like that, where your wife did. Was there another?
Would somebody repeat that closer to me? I'm sorry.
She's asking if there was another website, that your wife mentioned another website for that.
For what? Okay, susprep, susprep.com. Okay, it stands for Sustainable Preparedness. It's an abbreviation, and it's spelled susprep.com. susprep.com.
Whose that is, whose website?
Whose web, that's our son's. We're very closely intertwined, yes. Okay, I'll go ahead and start this. God bless you. Thank you for coming.